The finale of Severance Season 2 has just landed, and with 100% of the season now released, it calls for a celebration, right? In the words of Jay. Megan! Today is most definitely a momentous day. In this finale, we finally got insight into what Cold Harbor was. We saw Innie Mark and Outie Mark communicating with one another. Helly, or could that be Helena? Stared directly into the eyes of the woman whose husband she's going to run off with, while holding a smile as Gemma cried out for Mark. Mr. Milch reached his last nerve, and NDR and CNM joined forces to lead the uprising inside Lumen. It was honestly one of the best season finales of a TV series I've seen in a long time. Every tiny piece of dialogue made me emotional, and the progressive tempo shift from start to finish had me screaming at the TV in excitement. So with that, let's dive into this finale and discuss all things Severance Season 2, Episode 10, The Birthing Cabin. The birthing cabin scene. The scene in the birthing cabin was one of the most creative moments the show has carried out. We witnessed a conversation between Mark's Innie and his Outie in a way that began as time-consuming, with each needing to video record their responses and step outside so the other could receive the message on the camera. But as the scene unfolded, the exchange began to flow like a real-time conversation. With them facing each other and the editing transitioning seamlessly, it genuinely felt authentic. This was the moment where Innie Mark discovered that because he hadn't completed Cold Harbor yet, Gemma was still alive. He had no idea why he was in the birthing cabin or what Miss Coble wanted from him. But after listening to Outie Mark and hearing that he was crucial to rescuing Gemma, we saw the true moral dilemma of the season come to fruition. It brought back the recurring theme, the value of an Innie's life compared to an Outie's. We saw it earlier with Helly and Dylan. Helly having her body taken over while on the SAD floor by Helena and feeling used, and Dylan longing for a life with Gretchen. But we hadn't truly seen this dilemma play out for Mark until now. Outie Mark's plan to rescue Gemma meant that, once saved, they could prove she was kidnapped, exposing Lumen and essentially bringing the corporation to its knees. On paper, it sounded perfect. Mark and Gemma get their happy ending, and justice is served. But practically, it meant that if Lumen shut down, the severed floor and all the Innies would cease to exist. Their lives, however limited or unfulfilled, still had value, and they would be erased without a second thought. Innie lives matter because they have relationships, emotions, and memories, things that make them their own people, even if their Outies know nothing about them. Innie Mark said it best. We find ways to feel whole. Whatever this life is, it's all we have. But in the bigger plan that Mark, Devin, and Coble were cooking up, the Innies were an afterthought seen as disposable. One Outie's life would be saved, but at the cost of every single Innie. Outie Mark did say that he'd go through with reintegration, so Innie Mark could share a life with him, but Devin revealed he was lying, so Innie Mark was right to be skeptical. What began as a scene filled with intrigue and hope, two versions of the same person finally communicating, turned into one charged with hostility and tension. When Outie Mark referred to Helly as Helena and Innie Mark visibly bristled, it was such a human moment. Yes, they're technically the same person, but it revealed that Innie Mark genuinely cared for Helly and felt used. Outie Mark had never made an effort before now because he needed Innie Mark. He was suddenly being personable. But it rang hollow. It was a dynamic we hadn't seen before. From a visual standpoint, the structuring of the scene was powerful. Outie Mark outside in a cold, dark environment, while the Innie was in a warm, cozy space. The juxtaposition heightened the emotional divide between them. Front of the fire. I felt like the scene in front of the fire was symbolic not only of the Innie and Outie names they have, representing where they are in life, but also of the dynamic they now find themselves in. It also felt like foreshadowing, the darkness that Innie Mark would adopt right at the end. Outie Mark no longer held any power because Innie Mark chose to stay with Helly inside of Lumen. Outie Mark was nowhere to be seen, which symbolized that cold, dark place. Another brilliant element of this scene was how the camera subtly moved closer to both Innie and Outie Mark's faces as the conversation progressed. This added to the building intensity and made the pressure feel increasingly palpable. By focusing on their eyes, the scene emphasized that despite sharing the same face, what was going on inside their minds and behind their eyes was completely different. What is Cold Harbor? It was also during the cabin scene that we finally learned the purpose behind Mark's work and how it connected to Cold Harbor. It turned out that the numbers Mark felt strong emotions toward on the screen were actually representations of his wife Gemma's mental and emotional makeup. Each number sequence was essentially a doorway into her mind. That's why the numbers were placed into crates. They represented specific temperaments such as sadness, woe, frolic, malice, and dread. They were the building blocks of her mind. With every file Mark completed, it helped form a new consciousness and personality within Gemma. This explained why she behaved differently and didn't fully remember anything when she entered various rooms on the testing floor. Mark and Gemma's entire purpose was to complete all 25 refinement categories. Once they were done, both of them would be eliminated specifically. Any Mark, not the Audi, and then Gemma would die as well. The reason Gemma was to die upon completion was because she served as the host for a new SING chip that stored all 25 individual personalities. Dr. Ma was set to extract this chip, something we'd never seen done before, and something likely to have deadly consequences. The Cold Harbor room had been a mystery all season. When Gemma finally walked into it, we saw a stark, empty room with only a baby crib. She was instructed to dismantle it while wearing the same clothes she wore on the day Lumen took her the day she and Mark lost their unborn child. This was meant to trigger emotional responses. The song I'll Be Seeing You, which had played in episode 7 when Mark dismantled the crib and experienced a wave of grief, played again in this room. It underscored the emotion and helped trigger Gemma's suppressed memories. The most intriguing part about the Cold Harbor room was that Gemma didn't know who she was or why she was there. Both Ma and James described it as beautiful. It appeared that a mental barrier existed. This personality seemed like a blank slate, one that numbed her to pain and suffering and the traumatic memories of the past. The stimuli such as the crib, the song, and the outfit showed just how deeply the original Gemma had been buried. She had become unreachable. The ultimate goal of extracting the chip seemed to be its rollout to the public. With the ability to adopt multiple personalities, people could potentially switch between them based on the task or emotional situation they were facing. One personality could carry the pain or fear, while another handled the burden-free experience. Once again, it was the innie who bore the suffering. When Mark entered the room, referred to as the spouse by the doctor, his presence served as the emotional stimulus that cracked through Gemma's facade, ruining what was supposed to be a momentous day. Now, Gemma, with the perfected chip in her mind, something Lumen invested so much effort into, had slipped out through the stairwell exit. She was on the cusp of freedom. It became the opposite of a momentous day. Mark completing Cold Harbor with Helly. The scene where Mark completed Cold Harbor with Helly was unexpectedly emotional for me. This moment had been 2 seasons in the making, and that's what made it feel so powerful as it unfolded. At this point, we still didn't know if Mark would go through with the rescue mission for Gemma. Then Helly arrived on the severed floor, and honestly, I questioned his intentions even more. As the scene continued to play out, we saw the two of them, pretty much reflecting on their time together and explaining to one another the different experiences they went through the previous night. This scene included Mark being in the birthing cabin and what would happen once he completed Cold Harbor. It also touched on Helly and how James said he saw Kier in her, something I'll explore in the next section of the video. In addition, we saw them express how much they cared for each other and how they wanted to live together. Helly had almost made peace with the fact that Mark needed to leave, but it was something neither of them truly wanted. She said, "At least you'll have a chance at living," referencing the reintegration program he might go through. Still, it wasn't enough for Mark. When Helly said, "But I'm her," in response to Mark's wish to live with her, it showed that she was a different kind of innie compared to the others. Being the daughter of an Egan meant that no matter how much they wanted to be together, it simply wouldn't be possible. This also tied into Harmony's line, "There'll be no honeymoon ending for you and Helly R. Marks." The way this scene played out felt like something out of a movie or a TV show where a character is dying and saying their final words to their partner. It genuinely carried that emotional weight. When Helly said, "I wish we had more time," there was a deep sense of grief hanging over the entire moment. Later, when she told Mark, "See you at the equator," it was simply beautiful. Helly even referenced the very first conversation she had with Mark in Season 1, Episode 1, when they joked about Delaware and tried to think of other places. That moment of reflection and emotional connection made it feel like their time together was truly ending. A comparable emotional moment came when the alarm went off at the end of the episode. Amidst all the chaos, Helly stopped, looked up and smiled, proud that Mark had nearly completed the rescue mission. With Cold Harbor completed and the 25th file finalized, the celebrations began. A robotic wax model of Kier thanked Mark and hailed him as one of the most important people in Lumen's history. This was reinforced by the mural depicting Mark about to press the final key in front of Woe's Hollow, surrounded by all the employees he interacted with during his time at Lumen, showing he had truly become part of the company's legacy. Helly and Jaime Egan. There were so many strong character interactions in this episode: Drummond and Laura, Milchick and Dylan, and of course, Mark and Gemma at the end, but the interaction between Jaime and Helly was the funniest by far. Yes, it even beat Milchick running out like a school kid at recess. Helly literally called Jaime out to his face for being extremely weird, and it made me laugh out loud. I initially thought this interaction would lead to Helly being offered a chance to live her life under the overtime contingency protocol. Jaime essentially told Helly that he didn't love his daughter and that he used to see Kier in her, but that faded as she grew. This conversation also clarified Jaime's use of the birthing cabin. He said people would one day understand, and he hinted that he'd seeded many others in the shadows, suggesting he'd had multiple children in the hope that one might exhibit Kier's traits and eventually take the reins instead of Helena. However, by saying he saw Kier in Helly, Jaime implied he valued the innie more than the outie. Helly had achieved something no one else had in embodying Kier's values. This will be interesting to watch unfold in future episodes. If Jaime values Helly as an innie more than Helena, it could put her in a difficult position. She has the chance to live the life she's always wanted, not the half-life she currently leads. But I doubt she'll take it, given her disdain for the Egans and her view of Jaime and Helena as monsters. It's a subject that will almost certainly return in the next season. Jaime didn't explain why he was there when Helly asked, but I believe he plans to use her existence due to the Kier-like qualities he sees in her. Severance Season 2 Episode 10, Ending Explained. Honestly, the ending of this finale surpassed even Season 1's, which I thought would be hard to top. With C&M dancing and playing their music. We saw that Helly and Dylan were doing their best to keep Milch locked in the toilet to prevent him from getting back into MDR and interfering with Mark. Milch ordered the band to stop and return to their departments, which they were planning to do. But it was only after Helly rallied them with an inspiring speech about how they were living half a life and viewed as disposable that they found the courage to resist. Milch eventually broke free, but when he stepped out, he saw Dylan leading an army against him. This showed that the workers of Lumen were now prepared to rise up and stop bowing to the higher-ups, who often brought deadly consequences, something many had already experienced, as seen with the random disappearances of Irving and other team members. This uprising is something that will most definitely carry into the next season. The workers currently have the upper hand, as they outnumber management. The real question is, what is their endgame? Surely they'll have to leave at some point, and when they do, there will be serious repercussions unless they plan to stay on the severed floor for an extended period. Meanwhile, Mark was holding Mr. Drummond hostage, someone who had literally just tried to kill him. Honestly, I didn't expect that from Drummond. All Mark did was try to open a door, yet Drummond was ready to kill him for it. It felt like an overreaction, but it tied into the idea that Mark's service at Lumen was complete and that he was expendable, just as Harmony Coble had said. What I appreciated about Mark's search for the exports hallway was how it mirrored the opening scene of the very first episode. He was once again lost in a maze of identical-looking hallways. Even with directions, the white walls and maze-like structure of the severed floor disoriented him. When Mark reached the testing floor, he transitioned to his outie self as expected. But during the switch, The stun gun he was holding discharged, likely due to an involuntary muscle spasm. The result was fatal. Mr. Drummond was killed, and Mark was left covered in his blood. Ironically, that blood helped him gain access to Cold Harbor as he used it on his tie to get through the door. When Mark and Gemma laid eyes on each other for the first time, it was an overwhelming emotional moment. Mark had believed for years that his wife was dead, and now here she was alive, though not entirely herself. She didn't recognize him at first, likely due to her time in Cold Harbor. Despite this, she followed him and eventually left the room. Their true reunion happened just before they both ran for the elevator to return to the severed floor. There, the innie versions would take over Mark's innie, and Miss Casey, Gemma's innie. As the elevator doors closed, Dr. Maul shouted, "You'll kill them all!" This line could be interpreted in two ways. It may refer to the severed floor's secrets being exposed, potentially leading to the deaths or dismantling of those within, as Devon and Harmony had warned. Alternatively, it could refer to the 24 different personalities that Maul came to know within Gemma. If she returns to the outside world solely as Gemma Scout, those personalities would cease to exist, essentially being killed. That interpretation adds a layer of emotional and ethical complexity. Mark successfully completed his mission of rescuing Gemma and got her outside the stairwell. But when it was his turn to leave, he hesitated. And when he turned around, Helly was standing there. Honestly, when I saw her in the background, I groaned because I knew he wasn't going to leave now. The one person who could convince him to stay on the severed floor was right in front of him. Helly had previously said she wished they had more time together, and now, it seems like they'll get it. Gemma was screaming in the background for Mark to go and be with her. The roles were reversed. The Mark she knew was now trapped on the inside, while she had freedom on the outside. Helly's decision to lead Mark away from Gemma felt uncharacteristically cruel, which makes me wonder if the Glasgow block had been enabled, allowing Helena to take over. We know Helena cared deeply for Mark, having experienced emotions with him that she never had outside. She had betrayed both him and Harmony before, so it's not far-fetched to think she might do it again if it meant getting what she wanted. I'd also say that earlier in the episode, Helly was seen saying, "But I'm her," when Mark told her he wanted to spend more time with her and be with her. I wonder if the showrunners wanted us to take that quite literally, or if it was hell. Could the betrayal she committed connect to what James said at the start of the episode when he said he saw the fire of Keir within her? It felt like a true Egan act, what she did at the end. And if it was Helly, it could show that she does have Keir within her, despite not wanting to. Mark and Helly linked arms and ran down the hallway like Mark did in episode 1, like he did in the finale, and like he did with Gemma only moments earlier. I was devastated for Gemma. But it showed that Mark was taking control. He wasn't prepared to die for the sake of one person, and he also wasn't prepared to allow every single innie on the severed floor to spend the rest of their existence in eternal darkness, because the severed floor would no longer exist. I do wonder, though, if Gemma is now on the outside, is this Mark showing he'd rather die alongside the rest of the innies than walk away and potentially go through the reintegration process? Because at least this way he gets more time with Helly. It could well be. Mark showed that the value of an innie's life matters, that even if it's perceived to be a nightmare on the outside, there's beauty in what they do have, even if it's not much. Their existence is enough to warrant value, and they shouldn't be seen as disposable. The innies now hold the power for the first time in the show, and it's a dynamic that's going to be so interesting to return to. With the song "The Windmills of Your Mind" playing as Mark and Helly ran, it not only reflected how the mind is at the epicenter of the show and is so often confusing, but also spoke to the theme of indecision. The song is said to be about someone confused about what to do next, and that perfectly captured the position Mark was in during those final moments. Severance Season 2 Episode 10 Review. I thought this was simply a phenomenal episode. I think it could be the best the show has ever produced, easily up there with episodes 4 and 7 of this season. The pacing was something I was genuinely impressed by. The first half slowly immersed us into the story, with the scene in the cabin, the scene in MDR with Mark and Helly, and also with Dylan finding purpose. He became a motivating factor for his outie self to be better. Then, in the second half, from the moment Cold Harbor was 100% complete and the band came out, all hell broke loose. The mystery wasn't as present, but it didn't need to be. It was action-packed, exciting, and overflowing with emotion. One thing I was a little gutted about was that there was no Irving in this episode. I'm hoping that means we'll actually see where he went when the show returns for season 3. I just hope the character's okay. With the uprising now taking place, it seems like it's going to be a battle of the employees versus the higher-ups at Lumen, and that sets the stage for a potentially incredible season opener. And speaking of battles, the scene where Dylan screamed and came out of nowhere to save Helly by pushing the vending machine in front of the doorway was just perfect. That Dylan scream is genuinely iconic at this point. We also got the dance scene we were all waiting for. I didn't think they could one-up the one from season 1, but this one was just perfect. Milch absolutely owning the space had me in stitches. Despite it contradicting everything we've come to know about Lumen's tone, design, and mood, it just worked. Emotions were the heart of this episode for me, and they hit hardest when Helly and Mark had what felt like their final moments together. The darkness that surrounded the room, and the way the light focused solely on their faces, really captured what they were feeling. The sadness was palpable. I'd also say that when Mark and Gemma reunited after what felt like 2 seasons in the making, the smile on Mark's face and their embrace was just filled with love, passion, and relief. That entire scene where Mark navigated the testing floor was incredible. Seeing Mark covered in blood really contrasted with the sterile white surroundings. As for the goat sacrifice, it wasn't entirely cleared up, but it seemed like the goat was being offered as a sacrifice to guide Gemma after her chip was extracted, and she died at Kier's door. It made me think that the goats are viewed as sacred, possibly spiritual guides in this eerie and controlled world. The purpose of the goat in Kierism seems to be that of guidance. Lore said, "How many more must I give?" Which makes me think they've tested on a lot of people, and many have died in the process. I imagine we'll learn more about the goats when the show returns for season 3, especially since there were even statues of them at Salt's Neck. It's a poignant figure, with parallels to the Joker too, so maybe Kier's law will be explored in more depth. I hope so. This season of Severance has been one hell of a ride, and it ended with the greatest of crescendos. I'm absolutely devastated that it's over because it has delivered some of the best television not just this year, but in many years. It's definitely the best show of the year so far, and it's going to take a lot to knock it off the top spot. With Ben Stiller saying it won't take another 3 years for the next season to arrive, I'm hoping that's truly the case. If we only have to wait about a year or a year and a half, that would actually be pretty good in today's climate. Before I wrap up, I just want to say a quick thank you for tuning into all the Severance breakdowns I've done. I know a lot of people are covering the show, so it means a lot that so many of you kept coming back every week, watched the videos, and joined in the comments with your theories. It's been amazing reading and discussing them with you. Outrow. So, there you have it, Severance Season 2, Episode 10, Ending Explained. If you want to see breakdowns for every episode of Severance Season 2, click on the card in the top corner, there will be a playlist there. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. What did you think of the finale? Share your thoughts in the comments. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.